guys, welcome back to my channel and to my 12 days of Christmas. We are on day 4 and today I have a fun one for you guys. This is video 2 in my best in color series and today we are tackling browns. I have scoured through my collection, swatched hundreds and hundreds of eyeshadows and come up with my very favorite brown and neutral toned eyeshadows. I've got a variety of finishes in here, good range from light to dark. These are the best of the best, and I know brown eyeshadow might seem boring, or you might think that a brown eyeshadow is a brown eyeshadow. Is there a lot of difference? But trust me, you guys, as I have swatched so many different browns, there are subtle differences between them, and these truly are the ones that I love the very most. So I hope that you guys are excited to see the 12 shades I've selected. They look so pretty, swatched next to each other. I cannot wait to show you guys. For any of you new visitors to my channel, I want to welcome you here. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you do, I hope that you will subscribe to my channel. Make sure to hit that notification bell just so that you know every time I upload a new video. Now let's go ahead and get into some swatches. And we're going to kick things off with what I have many times declared to be my very favorite lid shade in my entire collection. And that is this baby right here. This is the Nomad palette by Juvia's Place. And this center shade is so beautiful and glorious. I talk about it all the time. I literally sing its praises all the time. It is the ultimate champagne slash gold. It is warm, but it's not brassy. It is champagne, but it does have more than just a cream color to it. Like, there is some pigment in here. I think it is so beautiful, so flattering, and when used with any combination of browns or greens, this is such a beautiful shade for your lid. It is very metallic, so if you don't like something very bold on your eyes, you probably won't like this, but I don't know how you could not want to put that on your eyes. It is liquid metal. It is so beautiful. I absolutely love it. The formula is really easy to work with. And if you by chance don't want to go for a foiled, really strong metallic lid, you can also use this with a brush and get a little bit more of a soft sheen out of it. But I love this one. I knew even before I started swatching that this would be included in the ranks, and it definitely held up to the test as I was swatching through all my other browns and shimmery golds or champagnes. Love this shade. It is the best. The next one I'm including is somewhat similar, but it's a little bit different. It is from the ColourPop Going Coconuts palette. This is the color Cocoa Crush here in the middle. This is a Super Shock formula, I believe. And this one is a bit more of a rosy champagne, whereas this one is a little bit more gold. As you can see them swatched next to each other, this one does just have a little bit more pink in it. Let me go ahead and swatch it live for you guys as well. So here it is. I know it looks very reflective, but if I turn it away from my lights, hopefully you can see the different undertone. This has a little bit more yellow or brown in it, whereas this has a little bit more of a kind of peach or pink tone to it. I suppose you could classify this shade as more of like a pink tone or a rose gold, but I still think it fits really nicely in with the brown tones because it's a very warm, rosy tan champagne is kind of how I would classify it. Love it though. So I knew when I was creating this palette that I would want something bright and shimmery on the lid that was leaning a little bit more cool tone. And for this one, I went with a shade from the Persona Identity palette, the original Identity palette. And I went with this one right here. This is the shade Seductive. I love the Persona formula. I talk about it often. It's very reflective, but it's not quite as intense and foiled as, say, even these right here. I mean, it's reflective, but it's a little bit more smoothing is basically what I'm trying to say. I don't mind something really strong and foiled on my eyelids, but it does emphasize texture. So if you are sensitive to that or you do have a lot of texture on your eyelids, maybe you have more mature skin and you're very cautious of the types of shimmers you put on your lids, this is a really good formula. So I'm including it for both that reason and also just the shade of this one. It is the perfect light to medium brown. So pretty. Probably one of my most reached for shades in this entire palette, and I love this palette. I use it all the time. Just look at these 3 shimmers next to each other. No matter what type of brown look you want to do, if you want something bright on your inner corner or your lid or even your brow bone, I feel like this gives you everything you would need. Covers all your bases. Moving into some transition shades. The transition shade is kind of the building block of any good eye look. If you want a good blend in your outer corner, you've got to start with a good transition shade. And I have a few of my very, very favorites. Starting with this one right here. This is from C Color Cosmetics. This is their Unisex 3 palette. And the shade that I'm including is this light tan right here. I thought that as I was swatching, I might find a dupe for this shade, but I couldn't find an exact dupe. I found some that were similar, but this one's still There's just something really special about this. I would say if you have a light to fair skin tone, this is a really special transition shade because it is very light. It's just like a half shade or a full shade darker than my actual skin tone when I'm at my fairest. And sometimes I find transition shades can be a little bit darker than I want them to be. This one is the perfect tone for my specific skin tone. I love it. It has a really soft tan, almost like a very subtle pink undertone to it, but it is still a good brown, a good basic neutral. This is the type of transition shade that you could throw into absolutely any eye look, whether you're working with greens or blues or browns or oranges or reds. You could work this into pretty much any eye look. It's just such a good one. Beautiful, beautiful color, great formula. I talked in my last video about how much I love the matte formula in this specific palette from C Color. I like their formula in general, but there's just something special about the mattes in this palette. They're super rich and creamy and blendable, but very, very pigmented. I'm pretty sure that I've mentioned this before, but this is still one of what I consider to be the very best transition shades in my entire very large eyeshadow palette collection. So we have a really good neutral cover, but I want something a little bit warmer and still light. And for this one, I'm going with Orange Soda by Anastasia Beverly Hills. I also really love Burnt Orange right below it, but I think if I had to pick one of the two, I'd go with Orange Soda because it is a little bit lighter, and there's just something really unique about popping this into your transition area because it does have just that really warm pop of orange, but it's not too intense. I mean, this is a really subtle orange, as you can see. Love this shade. Almost every time I go into this palette, I go right for that shade because I just love how this looks in my transition area, no matter what shades I'm going with below. Because I like more subtle looks, sometimes if I want to switch things up, I like adding that pop of warm or cool or color into my transition because I feel like it gives you a more subtle pop of something different. And this just, I think, is such a good transition shade if you want that warmth. Next, I had to pick a transition shade that was not warm, not neutral, but something that leaned a little bit more on the cool side. For this one, I picked the Natasha Denona Glam palette and this shade right here. This is the shade, well, it's called Crease. These shades are kind of odd. They don't actually have names if you're very familiar with this palette, but it's this kind of darker matte up in the top right there. I love this color. It's a very nice gray brown, which I love, a good gray kind of mousy brown. There are a lot of shades in my collection that mimicked this shade, but there's just something about this specific one. It's a little bit darker than some of the ones from Sydney Grace that I like, and I kind of like that sometimes because it makes it a little bit more versatile, because if I want to use this just really softly through my crease, it can give me just a tiny bit of definition, but I can build this up to get a decent amount of depth if I want to go for a little bit more depth as well. And I just love the cool kind of purpley gray undertone to it. I think it is so beautiful, and I love Natasha Denona's matte formula especially. It's one of my favorite matte formulas out there. Very, very pricey. Yes, you can find shades that would mimic this. In fact, I would even say probably in the Going Coconuts palette, this shade is close. It's just not quite as nice, not quite as dark, and not quite as rich and creamy and pigmented. Next up are my picks for bronzes. I'm talking like the lid shades here. These are lid shades that I think look good on absolutely anyone, regardless of what your skin tone is, what your undertone is, what your eye color is. I think a good bronze can look good on absolutely anyone. And one of my very favorites comes from Sydney Grace, and it's this shade right here. This is the shade Bronzed to Perfection. That is such a perfect name for this shade. This is the shade that I'm wearing all over my lid today. It is the perfect shade of bronze. As much as I love a good bronze lid, I'm actually kind of picky when it comes to bronzes. I find some of them, while I like a copper on occasion or something very warm or even a little bit brassy, I have to really be in the mood for something too warm or too brassy. And I think having something that is warm without crossing over into that kind of red or brassy tone can be really nice. And this is the perfect shade for that. It is a nice gold. It is warm. It's not a cool tone, but it's not overly brassy. It's not overly copper. It's just a perfect bronze. I have a lot of bronzes in my collection I really love. There's one from MAC that I still really love, the shade Woodwinked. I think that's a near perfect bronze. There's a lot in the bronze palette by Natasha Denona, but I still like this one better because it's not quite as warm as the ones in the bronze palette, but it is a little bit warmer than Woodwinked by MAC. I love this one. I mean, just look at this shade on my eyes. I feel like it's not too dark, but it's also not too light. It's just the perfect bronze. It is absolutely perfectly done. And have I mentioned how much I love Sydney Grace's shimmery or metallic formula? It is next level amazing. I do not think this formula can be beat. There's a lot out there that are really, really good, but this, honestly, in my opinion, is the best. But for those occasions when I do want to go for something really, really warm, almost kind of coppery, I decided to go with this shade right here. This is from the Zodiac Love Signs palette by BH Cosmetics. I love the shimmer formula in these palettes because it sort of reminds me a little bit of the Persona formula in the way that it behaves on your eyelids. So it's a formula that's a little bit more thin. It is a baked formula, so this one is more dry than even the Persona formula. But there's something about this shimmer formula that's very reflective, but it's also very kind of smoothing. And when you use these wet, they are so stunning. So the shade that I picked out of this one is this shade right here. This is the shade Leo. It is a beautiful, warm, slightly coppery bronze. Here it is right here. This doesn't have as much red as say a true copper does, but it does have more orange in it than this shade Bronzed to Perfection right here. And when I'm in the mood for something warm, I love working with orange tones on my eyes, and I just think this goes so well with like deep browns in the outer corner or orange popped up through your crease. It's such a beautiful shade, such a beautiful formula. I really love these Zodiac palettes from BH Cosmetics. I just think the formulas in these, especially the shimmer formula, is really unique and really special. But of course I've got to have something for those days when I want a cooler toned bronzy look. I do love a good cool toned bronze as well. And this shade right here is the one that I love the most. This is the Nubian 2 palette from Juvia's Place, and this shade right here is the shade Sheba. Oh boy, you guys, wait till you see this. It is so beautiful. I feel like these 3 shades for your lid, I just don't think you could ever want for anything more than those 3 right here, unless you're into really red tone bronzes. But I do have a red category coming up, so stay tuned for that. Aren't those shades just so stunning? I just absolutely love them. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I do have on my inner corner, the very first shade I showed you, the one from the Nomad palette, I do have a little bit of that gold popped on this inner corner right here and slightly overlapping this inner part of my lid where I had the shade Bronzed to Perfection. Forgot to mention that, but honestly guys, these, if I could pick 3 bronze lid shades, these would be my 3 top picks. And as I have said several times, I swatched so many bronze toned eyeshadows. I have so many of them in my collection as someone that truly loves her neutrals and her browns, her bronzes. But these are the 3 that stood out above the rest, the ones that I felt like I couldn't live without. We are down to my last 3 shades in my top 12 brown shadows. You guys, if you know anything about me, or if you know me a little bit, you'll know how much I love a deep chocolatey brown in my outer corner. And coming up with a top 3 for this category was very difficult. I know there are a lot of people out there that would say a deep brown eyeshadow is a deep brown eyeshadow. And while I think that is somewhat true, there are subtle differences between them, and there are some that I prefer over others. So these are the 3 that I had to include today. And the first one comes from the Natasha Denona Safari palette, and it's this brown right here. This is the shade Thorn. This is such a beautiful, really rich, warm brown. I know I've already talked about how much I love Natasha Denona's matte formula. There is just something so nice about it. It's so easy to work with. It's super pigmented, and I love this shade. It looks like milk chocolate. It's like hot chocolate on your eyelids. Forgive the orange staining underneath. Hopefully my swatches that I insert for you guys will be a little bit more easy to read, but oh boy, you guys, that is such a beautiful shade of brown. It's not quite as deep as the next 2 that I'm going to be talking about, but sometimes I like something, I mean, it is still quite deep, but it's not like deep, almost black toned, but sometimes I like to go for just kind of a straight chocolate, and this is one of my favorites to reach for. Absolutely love it. I have a lot of other warm browns in my collection. In fact, I almost included the one from Tati Beauty, but this one's just a little bit warmer, a little bit richer, so I decided to go with this one. For my next matte brown shade, we're going back to the Nomad palette by Juvia's Place, and I'm going with this deep brown right here. Juvia's Place has so many good deep browns. In fact, there's another great brown inside this palette right here. I love that one. I love the brown that's in the Deuce palette. That's another one that's fantastic. But this one I think is just a touch deeper, a touch richer. Just take a look at this, you guys. It is a true like blackened chocolate brown. It's like a dark chocolate. This is such a good, rich shade. It works so well to build up a lot of depth in your outer corner. If you like a true smoky eye, this is a great one to achieve that with. I love using this as kind of a smudgy liner. You can even use it with an angled brush and a little bit of fixing spray and get a really precise liner out of this. I just love a good chocolatey brown. It's so versatile. It gives you tons of depth, almost to the level that a black would. But I nearly always prefer a brown over a black because I just like a little bit of warmth to my eye looks. And this is a great alternative. If you don't like the starkness of black eyeshadow or black liner, this is a great one because it gives you the depth that a black would give with just a tiny touch of warmth or softness. Down to my last pick in the top 12 browns, we're going to go back into the Persona palette. I'm going with this shade right here. This is the shade Fearless. Pretty much everything I just said about that Juvia's Place shade applies to this shade, only slightly amplified. So this one is just a little bit cooler and a little bit deeper and richer. It might be hard for you guys to see the difference in these two. This one does have a really interesting undertone. It's very charcoaly, almost purple, but it's super, super dark. Yet it still has brown in it as well. This is just such a good shade. If you're wanting to really stick with like a cooler tone brown smoky eye, this is the perfect shade to really smoke out your outer corner or use as a liner. It's a deep brown that's not truly ashy, but super, super dark, but it's also not warm at the same time. So there's a very specific time and place for this shadow when I really want to smoke something out and add a lot of intensity, but I still don't want to use a black. That's the shade that I'll dip into. It is the shade that I'm wearing just here on my outer corner. I don't have any normal liner on. This is the one. I basically just took a kind of a fluffy smudge brush like this, tapped it into that shadow, and just really started kind of dabbing it along this lash line to build up some depth. And I forgot to mention to you guys, I am also wearing in my crease. The warmth that you see in my crease is actually from the Natasha Denona palette, the color Thorn. But this deep, rich smokiness that you're seeing in my outer corner comes from this shade right here. Absolutely love it. When I really want to go like super smoky and deep, this is such a good one to go with. And as I was swatching all of my dark browns, I really noticed how unique this shade actually is. And no matter how smoky I want to go, how warm I want to go, I feel like these have all of my bases covered. And that, you guys, is it for the best of my brown eyeshadows. Let's take a look at them one more time, all lined up on my arm. Wouldn't this make the most beautiful palette? I don't know that my swatches do it justice. I will not pretend to be a master of swatching on camera, but I'm telling you guys, these are the best of the best. And this one was very tough because I have a lot of neutrals and browns that I absolutely love, but these are the ones that, when push came to shove, stood out above all the rest. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I would love to know from you guys, what are your very favorite browns out there? Whether that's a gold or a bronze or something matte. Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you guys. I want to remind you once again to make sure that you are subscribed to my channel and hit that notification bell just so you don't miss out on the rest of my videos I have coming up during this 12 days of Christmas. Merry Christmas to you guys. Happy holidays. I hope that you guys are doing well. Thank you guys again for stopping by, and I will see you guys all in my next video. Bye.